So, we're here to talk about what's happening with mobile music, the new platforms, the new technology, and I can't think of anybody else to start off giving us an overview of where things have gone, where they're at now, and where he thinks they're going than my dear friend on the very far end there, Mr. Dave Ulmer from Motorola. So, Dave, why don't you start us off and get the conversation going?
Thanks, Ted.
Always loves the No pressure, really. Just carry the rest of the panel for me. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I think we talk here in our little small groups of people that come to these conferences and understand and watch and live and breathe this on a daily basis. We sometimes miss out on what's really happening in the real world, walking out on the streets as to what people are doing with mobile. It was a very short time ago that your phone that you carried with you, in fact, I was just looking at my mom's last week. She came by and visited, and she pulls this phone out, and here I am working at Motorola, and man, I was embarrassed. This thing was sort of had this glow-in-the-dark green text that would show up when a call came in. I guess she could do text, she just didn't know how. And I tried sending her a picture, and I discovered that her phone didn't receive pictures. It received a little note that said, "You've got a picture if you go to this website." And like she would do that. We have come so far so fast, but yet we're not there yet. Today, if you look at the phones in your pocket, they are just except for Ted's pocket, they are just a small picture of what's going to be coming within a year and a half, within 2 years. This landscape is changing dramatically. When I think back, and I think the guy from Nokia on the last panel made a comment that who would have thought it? Who would have thunk that today the largest camera manufacturer on the planet would be Nokia? Motorola's number 2. I think within 5 years, by a long shot, the largest portable music player, portable video player manufacturer on the planet is either, we can argue who it is, but it's going to be one of us. It's going to be one of the mobile phone manufacturers. And that theory, that dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ken Hertz.
One device that does everything, that is your music player, is your satellite radio, it's your iPod, it's your phone, it's your portable TV, that is coming. I've seen them. Ted's seen them. And it's actually coming because consumers are asking for it and consumers are paying for it.
Okay, so we've got this opportunity, Adam.
Wait, that's me.
That's you. How does Universal Music take advantage of this new landscape? What are you doing? What's the latest?
Sure. I think Dave's right. We've come a long ways. We have a long ways to go. I think what's exciting is that you do have an enormous amount of technology bundled into a device today that is actually changing the way that consumers interact with each other. Because let's keep in mind, a phone is ultimately a communications device. And I think in the way of personalization, you're seeing, this has been a huge growth market all over the world where consumers are personalizing their phone with images, with master tones, with ringback tones, and now more and more the ability to download full track music on their phones, which certainly Sprint and Verizon have done a good job of this year. We have a long way to go. There's not a lot of ubiquity in the industry. It's confusing to consumers which device does what. How do I tell my friend about something that's really cool on the deck? Overall, we've made strides this year to really enable a lot of the labels. I work for Universal Music Mobile, which oversees all of the mobile efforts across all of the UMG labels. So one of the things that we worked on this year was to better enable our labels to actually help market and promote mobile content through all the various means that they currently promote music, which could be posters, CDs themselves, and really enabling the ability to download content straight from a short code, which, as you know, is the ability to download a piece of content or specifically go to a WAP deck that could have a whole element of content by touching in a keyword to a 5-digit code, which thankfully is now becoming more ubiquitous in terms of the ability in the US. So that's a huge growth area for us, I think, is just enabling our labels and quite frankly our artists to speak directly to their fans and make music a little bit more social on a very social medium, which is mobile.
So what's the most innovative thing you've done in the last couple months?
Believe it or not, I think enabling shortcodes and getting labels to understand. In many ways, if you remember the early days of the web, when you want me to put this long address on a poster or on a piece of packaging that makes no sense to me. It says HTTP, and there's a bunch of other letters in there. That was a hard thing to overcome, where people not that long ago were confused about putting URLs on posters and packaging, and I think now we're getting to a point where that understanding and the willingness to put shortcodes on packaging is a huge step forward, because it really enables the entire industry to move forward on the awareness and, again, getting people to consume more music.
Okay. And Cyril, you're powering all this now. You got all these smartphones out there. Are they smart enough yet?
Well, actually, we also do deliver technologies onto devices that are not smartphones, but also feature phones. So the main technology enablers, like the digital rights management system from Microsoft, lives in basically any environment, whether it's a smartphone or a $50 feature phone. I think if we think back a few years, and I want to connect to what Dave said, in the past it was always the network and the devices where we said, well, we don't have the networks, it's slow, you cannot do over-the-air delivery, and the devices are not capable of delivering a great end-user experience. And I think in 2006 and especially in 2007, we don't have that problem anymore. We will have lots of devices that have Wi-Fi connectivity or 3G connectivity. The devices have lots of memory, are pretty powerful devices. They can store a lot of music. But at the end of the day, I'm a little scared that we are promising too much and we're not able to deliver on the expectations that we are creating with the end user right now. If you take a look on what Verizon and Sprint are doing, the promise is very high. We say, well, the phone works great and everything is just easy and simple and you can share your music and walk around with it. And if you really try that, we're not there yet. There are tons of little tiny problems that we still need to solve. I think at the end of the day, if a user uses his phone rather than an iPod to listen to music, we are there, but we are not there yet.
Interesting. Ken?
I wasn't here for the question.
You want to-
I love the answers, but I wasn't here for
Well,
the
there was
question.
no question.
There wasn't a question yet. I have a unique question for you.
Go ahead.
What's the art? As the new platforms are rolling out and we have these new opportunities, is it a time to rejigger the deck, so to speak, in terms of what the artist's role and the artist's share is in all this? Is this one of those inflection points where we can redefine?
Well, my experience with this is, and part of what I'm hearing from the other panelists' answers to your last question is that, we're not nearly at an inflection point. And the reason we're not at an inflection point is because this thing is still taking shape. In other words, we went through a period where for almost 45 years, everybody got their recorded music the same way. Right? And everybody knew, and it started out, by the way, with one company, RCA, making both the players and the content. Right? And so that eventually moved to, lots of different companies making content and lots of different companies making players, but they all worked essentially the same way. They were all interoperable. There was no, there were very limited limitations, if you will, on what it was, what it could do, and what the consumers.
Your expectation was met.
Right, and during the advent, if you will, of the digital revolution, which I think was really all about having access to email. I always thought my mother would use her email when it operated like a toaster. It's like, because you could just say, just do this, and this is what comes out the other end. And that still, unfortunately, hasn't happened. And as a result, my mother really still does not really use her email, although a lot more people, use it than we ever might have imagined would use it this quickly. My point is that I think that on mobile devices, we, like every other part of this kind of, connectivity revolution, if you will, with mobile devices, what's happened is we keep having these kind of great ideas that are too early for whatever reason, right? It's like we know what we want the thing to do. As was just pointed out, it would be great if you just listened to your music on your phone. Far more complicated for a million different reasons than any of us would want it to be, but nevertheless, it's really complicated. And so to answer your question, are we at an inflection point? No, we're not at an inflection point. And the reason we're not at an inflection point is because I can't say to somebody, hey, let's get a song, and have anybody know what I mean by that. Have anybody know what that process is going to be like, because it's going to be different for every single person. Every person on this panel would have a different explanation of what the consumer experience should and would feel like, and every person in the audience might have a different impression. And a lot of people would say, oh, I do that all the time. And a lot of people would say, I have absolutely no idea how to do that. And a lot of people would say, I don't even know if that's possible. And so, no, we're not at an inflection point. So from the artist standpoint, so little is going on an individual artist or individual song basis to amount to any kind of meaningful revenue, right? And the only thing the artists are doing is they're hoping that something happens while their career is still in action.
But right now, it's not about revenue for your artists, but how are the artists that you're representing exploiting the mobile opportunity?
I think, the ones that are, big and successful, the Gwen Stefani's and the Black Eyed Peas and the Destiny's Childs and and those kinds of clients, they can do whatever they want. I mean, the truth of the matter is they're not interested in how much music is sold online, how many ringtones are sold online. At the end of the day, they're interested in who's going to write them a big check and what do they want to do in exchange for that big check. Right? Because right now, people are out committing publicity stunts, right? It's like, I've got
They're digital stunts.
Right. I've got this new business, and here's, here's Gwen Stefani to talk about her. Here's Shakira in my Verizon commercial. You know what I mean?
Right.
None of that represents, a change in the business model, not yet.
Andy, your reflections on all this.
Can you guys hear me?
Can you hear me now?
I work for Wider Than, which is a content and platforms company. We provide platforms around the world, most notably a music service for SK Telecom in Korea for their Melon service, as well as Verizon's Vcast music service. The thing that excites me is you think about Apple. We've heard a big to-do about it's 5 years since iPod, and hey, we're not there yet. We now have players that have the marketing muscle. They don't have to go in a direct billing relationship. They can establish a lot more, a lot faster. I think the thing that excites me the most is the opportunity for things like subscriptions. I mean, subscriptions have been succeeded up to now in a mass market because it's food that everyone thinks that they won't like, but if they try it, they think it's excellent.
Right.
And
it's really been hard to message.
Yeah,
It's really been hard to explain why anyone would want to subscribe until you try it.
And you need someone that has the religious conviction to get to a viable price point, the marketing muscle, an existing direct billing relationship, look at TiVo. It kind of took a while, and just part of what really fueled its growth was DirecTV saying, "This is good for you. Eat your broccoli. You're going to like it." And now everyone it's a DVR now. It's not TiVo.
Okay, so you were just acquired by Real?
Yeah.
And how does that unfold, and what does that mean for you?
Not much I can comment on.
Oh, come on, Rob's not here. I won't tell him what you said. It's all between us, right? Sorry,
Well,
Norman, no one will tell him. There's no press here, right?
Practically just us.
Practically. And they didn't even know I was coming. They still stayed away. So, what's next? I mean, we're talking about where we're at now. And you say we're not fulfilling the promise yet. What's going to help fulfill the promise? Because we've got Wi-Fi, we've got 3G, we've got all these tools that we thought that by mid-2006 we were over the hump. Ken says we're not at an inflection point.
Yeah,
What gets us there?
I just say, I think we were all there back when PCs first came around. We started playing around with these new things you put on a desk, and man, was it tough. You wanted to put a formula into Excel, or you wanted to format a page in Word, or the prior version of Word Perfect. You had to download fonts. If you wanted a new printer. It was on and on and on, and the same exact words were being said. And it flourished because there was a demand. There were people that wanted to do it, and the technology got better. And at some point, we were all writing emails to all of our friends, and my mom's texting me back now. And
most people there's a lot of people I've sent text messages to that literally wrote back saying, I didn't know my phone did text until
I've
you
had that
texted
too.
me.
Oh my God,
After they
phone
text you
starts
back, who is
vibrating.
this?
Who is this?
Yeah.
Who is this? Right.
Yeah, but about the inflection point, I think today was actually a pretty interesting day for us at Motorola in our iRadio group, because today was the day that an artist released her first album that I was sitting in a radio station in Nashville the day that this young girl named Taylor Swift came in, and she pulled out her guitar and she played for the guy on air. It was a pretty big station there in Nashville, and it was just an amazing voice, an amazing song, and she's a phenomenal personality. And we were all sort of aghast. We said, "Wow, this is great." And the guy on the radio after she left said, "Yeah, that was great. We're not going to play her." And because nobody knows her. And I think when we talk about the opportunities that are coming about because of this explosion of digital mobile media, one of them is that people who didn't normally have access or previously have access now do. And even in the big labels, you're finding that more people that you wouldn't have put as much money behind can still have access to a fan base. And after that day in the radio station, I gave a call to a counterpart over in AOL and a counterpart at Sirius, and we said, "This is nuts. This girl needs to have an audience." And we played her. We played her before radio stations would, a good month before anybody heard about her. And today her album comes out, her first album. She's #2 on the Billboard charts for country. And so watch for Taylor Swift. It's just a great example of something that is happening, undercurrents of things that are occurring right now because of this explosion, this very small, non-inflection point explosion of mobile that's taking place.
Well, wait. I caught you. I got you with the. I was sitting in a radio station, and a girl who hadn't been signed came in, and I got you with her record comes out today, and it's #2 on Billboard. What did mobile have to do with the part in between?
So,
I'm just trying to understand. I mean, the truth is, until I sat on this panel, I didn't even know there was a Motorola radio. So I'm in the business, so I'm just trying to get that.
So in our case, I mean, there's a combination of mobile and the internet and satellite radio, these non-traditional venues for music distribution. Mobile is one of those legs of that tripod. For our sake, with Motorola iRadio, we released this out to our crowd of consumer trial users that are in place right now. No, it doesn't move the needle with respect to numbers of consumers that have access to music, but the combination of the three forces of internet and satellite and mobile did start a groundswell that convinced the radios to start playing. Radio is not out of the loop. Terrestrial radio picked it up after we started the show. Well, the day I put this onto iRadio, it went into the wish list and into the top 6 presets of this percentage of our users. AOL had it come back with the number of requests that came in because they were playing it. Sirius had the same thing. And it showed a proof point to the terrestrial radio stations they should start playing. And so across MySpace, where she has a site, across the Clear Channel stations that started to pick it up, she had a presence where the experiment would not have occurred had it not had an audience somewhere else first.
Okay, I'm
Well,
sorry.
you missed it because he hadn't written you a big check.
Who?
Motorola.
Yes, that's right.
That's the message.
No, my point is, honestly, I've never heard of Taylor Swift, but I'm sure she's doing quite well in the country chart, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just saying that, I think for too long we have, along the way, heard that speech from new business ventures in this space, and that it is very seductive because it makes a whole heck of a lot of intuitive sense, right? In other words, there are audiences that can't find music that they want through traditional means, and there are all kinds of new ways to communicate with those tiny audiences and to get, create groundswells of support. No disagreement there. My problem is that unfortunately I think we have two kinds of long tail going, right? We have the long tail, which is, billions of artists with teensy little audiences.
Right.
That's one long tail, and it's hair thin.
Right.
And it goes on forever. And then we have another long tail, which is all of these new business ideas, right, that have no customer base, no critical mass, some of which get a disproportionate amount of investment money, some of which are just pure startups with no investment money. But that tail is pretty long as well.
Right.
And companies like Reel aggregate those, or MSN or Yahoo, they try to aggregate those as soon as they perceive them as having traction,
Right.
try to roll them together and, take
Right,
them out.
there are
take them out of the
companies
tail and
that
put them
think
in the
they're a business that actually are a feature, and they need to be acquired, and they need to be rolled.
Right, but I do
Agreed.
think that there is a real lack of meaningful data or helpful information about how any of these things really make a difference. I think it is disingenuous and perhaps even a little bit scary to me to hear someone suggest that mobile is a but-for cause of Taylor Swift's success.
But in a
As
world,
opposed to hey, here's an artist. Well, I heard two stories there. One was mobile is a but-for cause of this girl's success. But the other story I kind of heard was, hey, I saw her when she was nothing, and now she's not nothing anymore. So something must have happened in the interim. Right? But I don't think any of us, if we knew what happened in the interim, we'd have a much better music industry.
absolutely. But in a world right now where radio is tight and shelf space sucks and towers going out of business over on the promenade around the corner, doesn't it behoove us, those of us who work with artists, to try everything out there to see if we can create those groundswells?
No.
No?
It does not behoove us, people who work with artists, to try everything. But I do agree with you that...
I don't mean everything, but to try different things.
Of
Not
course.
try
No, of
everything,
course.
but
No, of course. Everyone
avail
needs to
yourself
find-
of the opportunities.
to find an audience, and there's all kinds of new ideas of ways of finding audience, right? But unfortunately, as the din rises, it becomes harder, not easier to rise above.
Well, to get large, you always need a big machine. And that I think that's always going to be there. I think items like iRadio or or mobile can help you get there. And I think it's ultimately what you're saying. But when you go long tail, you say infinitesimal audiences. Some artists, they're not meant to be huge. Let them get to what they're meant to be.
And make a
Enjoy
living.
their lives and make a living.
Right.
Things used to be worked regionally. Now they're worked to demographically or to similar tastes. Here are the outlets I can go reach my audience. It isn't I have to go start in Atlanta, keep playing Atlanta until I find my right audiences.
Right.
Let me use all these different places and find my audience.
Right, I think that the disconnect we usually have is that somewhere along the line, the description, the sort of apocalyptic description of what's going on out there, which is completely accurate, right, scares people into thinking, oh my gosh, the big artists, where will they come from? And the truth is, we will never have a shortage of big artists. There will always be big superstar artists because there are always huge audiences looking for big superstar artists, right? They may have shorter careers, perhaps, than they used to, or whatever, but there will always be plenty of superstar artists. The question really is, how does this changing marketplace make it possible for more artists to go from having, no career to having some career or
So they don't need
or
a
make
day
a
job.
living,
Right, make a living. So music is their
We've
main.
headed to a point where you either made a living or you're either rich or you're out of business.
Exactly.
Right.
Adam, you look like you
Well,
had something.
I think just to Dave's point, in terms of mobile being a discovery tool or a tastemaker device, one of the things that we've done throughout the years is actually worked on windowing products. So Rick Ross and Rihanna are good examples of actual artists where when they were new, they were just coming into market. They were obviously getting a lot of radio play, but we were essentially providing only the master tone as the one product before the single or the album was out. And we were really able to drive the market in the anticipation. And these artists sold well over 1 million master tones before their album actually came out and went platinum prior to an album release. So I do think that the spirit of mobile...
Let's go a little deeper on that. So how do you sell 1 million master tones before the record ever comes out?
We did that with Rick Ross, and it was a pretty... that as far as I
So,
know,
can
guess-
you dive into the campaign a little
One-
bit?
one of the
How do you
things
create
we-
awareness at that level to sell 1 million master
I think
tones?
you have a few things going. I don't think, to your point earlier, I don't think that you do this independent of everything else. You do need radio. Radio is everything, but I think there's also, again, going back to personalization, we're not talking about full track downloads here. We're talking about the ability for people, if there's a banging track that everybody really wants to be in on, and they want that track, the only place you can get that is either through radio or on your handset. Obviously, what we did is we worked with our carriers, our direct-to-consumer distribution partners, and we were really pushing that track for a long period of time, to the point that we were able to actually get, well over 1 million units sold prior to the album release. And so that...
Was there a full track download at the same time?
No.
So you held it back?
We held it back. So, part of that is, I think there are a lot of opportunities. It's still early days, and we have a lot of experimenting to do. But in certain cases, I think mobile can be a great taste-making platform that really helps people discover something and be part of that music experience prior to another availability. And I think that makes mobile quite powerful because you have direct availability. The download and the billing is immediate, so you don't really have to wait around to play it.
Okay. So, back to what I started to ask you before in terms of, you said, and you and Dave on either end here are the technology gods. How far away are we from having that seamless experience that can...
From Toast.
How away are we from Toast, as opposed to being Toast?
Well, we need to define the scenario we're looking into. If we're looking into a scenario where we want to deliver, well, I use the term side loading, so you connect your mobile phone to the PC and you are able to use it as a portable audio player. I think we're very close to deliver on that scenario in a very nice and convenient way. That's probably happening sometime in 2007, so next year. Phones have USB 2.0 and they can consume media in a very nice and fast way. Windows is able to connect to those phones without drivers and so on. So there's lots of technology advancement happening these days, and we will see those results in 2007. And I think these results are important. We need to kind of create the foundation for future business scenarios. We cannot ignore the basics and then hope that we have peer-to-peer, super distribution, sharing, and everybody can experience to the music at the same time. And I can just move music from my phone to Dave's phone, whether I'm Verizon, could be a T-Mobile customer, and so on. All the scenarios everybody's thinking of, we can only deliver on those when we create the foundation for that. And I do believe we're doing that in 2007, and in the meantime, we need to explore those new business opportunities. And I do believe that we should not try to do everything at once, but we need to have a kind of stepwise approach where we create the foundation and then introduce slowly one business scenario after the other so that we can educate our end user base.
We're not there. I think it might have been what somebody on this panel that said it once. I heard it on a panel. The most user-friendly music experience is radio. You turn it on, and all of a sudden music comes out. Mm-hmm. We're not there, and I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon, but I think the closer we can get to there, whether it's music you want or don't want, we have to come to the steps. I agree with you on that point.
I think the problem with that is in the age of entitlement, which is what we're in right now. We've gone from wonderment through empowerment. Everyone's now entitled that they don't want to.
In a way, we're going to be back at radio. I mean, we're going to when the device is a Wi-Fi device,
right,
and you live in a WiMAX,
right,
geographic area,
right,
and you turn on your phone and change the channel and get whatever music you want because it's being streamed to you by Wi-Fi, even if it's on demand or interactive,
right,
or what have you. That is radio.
Well, it's a radio experience,
radio.
but you're in control.
Right.
Which is what
it is. You sort of turn on your device and boom, there's the stuff. And at that point, Motorola becomes far more important than Verizon or Singular.
The change that's going to have to take place, that needs to take place in the radio business, that it is causing this constriction now, is really that this choice, this phenomenal choice of content that's up there on the internet, that's available anywhere else you go, isn't available on the radio anymore. It used to be that you could turn the channel and you'd actually hear a different channel. Now it's much more like you turn the channel on the radio and it sounds like the same songs playing, same 30 songs over and over, same styles. It's all. So when it changes from advertising driven to consumer subscription driven, or some other type of sponsored delivery of content, then we have the ability for a consumer to turn on, they'd be compelled to turn on their phone or whatever portable device they happen to have and turn the channel and listen to something they really want to hear.
Which I think brings the question, what do you think the consumer acceptance or appetite or tolerance is for ad-supported content on mobile devices? Are people going to handle advertising to get what they want for a lesser cost or for no cost? Is advertising going to be a big play here, or is it going to be a distraction?
I'm going to throw it out and say it's going to be a big play, but not advertising as we think of it now. It's something that's very quick. You only have X amount of time to do.
So real short interstitials, blip verts.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. The point is, it's impossible now because of how heavily marketed to we are. I think it's impossible now to conceive of a new medium and not being advertised or supported on some level. And I think we used to believe that the internet was going to get away with being. There was a moment in time when people were hostile toward advertising on the internet. Right. It's gone away completely, but there was a moment where people actually sincerely believed that the internet was for people who could either pay for it or for people that were just altruists who wanted to provide content without any business model or objective at all.
Right. And we had a session last night. We had a mobile entertainment forum panel last night on ad-supported content. Anybody get to attend? Scott was there. So, I mean, it's a big issue right now. I mean, I think most people are pretty bullish that people will accept advertising if it's done properly. I mean, I'm the only person probably in the room who goes to a movie theater early if it's a digital cinema to watch the TV commercials, because they're actually making them for the theater now. The commercials they're showing are not just repurposed television commercials. They're making them for a 50-foot screen, and they're pretty impressive. So if it's done right for the medium, it will be accepted. So, audience questions. Dave, you can't leave.
Sorry.
See, call out names when you question from the audience. Anyone? Scott, you must have a question. Silence. Nobody has a question. Okay, there's a hand.
I'm Brenda Lane Osuna, and with all of this artist content that's out there, because of being able to produce it at home and independently, do you see using new technologies to connect the artist with labels in a better way, rather than this old-fashioned cream rising to the top sort of thing? Because now there's too much in the bowl to get to the top, to get actually to the labels. So how do you see using technology to facilitate that relationship?
Yeah.
I would have a different answer, I'm sure, than anybody else on the panel on this one, but I'm in the middle of doing 3 different deals, I think, that are kind of interesting and address the issue that you're raising. One is a group of artists that were formerly signed as individuals or as members of other groups who got together and formed, a new group, and they'd all sort of been through the traditional ringer, and they figured out how to get the record made themselves. They all knew people, they knew engineers, they knew studios, they had favors to call in, and they made a really terrific record with real talented players, and they got it done themselves, which is something new. The technology allows them now to actually, for the amount of money that a guy can, with a day job can put together, you can actually make a decent record without having to spend $500,000, right? So they did that, and then they made a deal directly with Starbucks, and they own the record. There is no record label involved. And Starbucks can put the record out and take it outside in the record.
Who's the artist?
And sell the record. And it'll come out in January, right? And they'll sell the record, and then it will be an interesting experiment. It'll be the first time an artist without a record label relationship will actually put the record out. And these guys specifically don't want an artist relationship, don't want a record label relationship. But Starbucks signed it not because anybody had heard of any of these people. They signed it specifically because it was just really, really good and a good fit for what they thought spoke to their audience, and they wanted people to say, who the hell is that, right? So that's part of their sort of the research. The lesson they've learned is that people come in looking for Starbucks to tell them about something they might not have otherwise heard of. So that's why they're trying to, it's an experiment, right? Making another deal with a traditional retailer where the project itself is being financed by the retailer in a different way, where the retailer basically said, I'm going to pre-order 100,000 copies of this thing if you'll put it together for me, right? And I'll pay way less than I would expect to pay. So instead of paying $10, $50, or $11 a CD, I'll pay you $7 a CD, but I'll pre-order them. It's on a one-way basis, right? No returns. I'll give you a check for $700,000 when you deliver 100,000 copies of the record. Artists can do a lot of damage with $700,000, right? And then once again, it'll be marketed by the retailer, it'll be exclusive to the retailer on some level, and that's a different model as well. Once again, with a record that won't come out initially, at least, through a traditional record deal. And then lastly, I'm making a deal with a big label who have come to an artist who a lot of people were interested in and said, tell you what, we're willing to make a much better deal with you. We're going to make and we've heard about these deals with EMI, Robin Williams, more recently. But in this deal, they said, we're going to make a deal with you where you get 2/3, we get 1/3 of the profits in everything. And here's what everything means, right? Endorsements, sponsorship, touring, acting, whatever. And if we collectively hire a manager, then that manager comes off the top, right? And if we put the records out ourselves, full transparency, here's the way the record deal works. Here's the way the manufacturing costs are, everything, stuff that they normally wouldn't show to anybody, right? And on the new media front, on the new technology front, they basically have brought a bunch of strategic partners to the party where they've said, we're going to make an online relationship with this portal partner, let's call it, and we're going to make a mobile relationship with this carrier/handset manufacturer as well. In other words, they basically said we're going to leverage all of these big relationships. We have a deal with a car manufacturer who wants to cross-market with us, and we have a deal with an event that wants to cross-market with us, and we're going to plug this into all of those things, and we're going to present it as though it's always existed. So that's the answer is all of this talk, all of this chatter about music, defining audiences, and being useful in marketing, and all the connectivity stuff in between has made people start to look at business models completely differently.
Okay, but in each of those examples, these are artists that either have a history, have a background, have a name.
No, the last
No.
one doesn't at all.
The last one is somebody
Last one's just somebody
completely...
completely off
Right.
the radar.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Just
'Cause
somebody who was getting a lot of interest from everyone.
Okay, because I think the part of the question is, if you are an undiscovered artist, how do you get noticed? How can you get attention other than through the normal channels? Is that correct?
Yeah, are there new avenues for artists?
I mean, there was an announcement from my former employer, EMI, this morning, which I haven't seen yet, but Parlophone in the UK is letting people submit their demos electronically, which shouldn't be a new idea in 2006, but it's a new idea. So they're letting people submit MP3s to the A&R department to be listened to. Is that going to, that pipe will clog pretty quickly, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, you're assuming that there's something on the other end besides the normal, usual pair of ears that, assuming they're open at all, are capable of picking winners.
Okay.
Well, you guys have been to New York City, lived in New York City, anybody? I mean, you can't have an original good idea. You go somewhere good, within 5 minutes, other people are there. So it's basically, you can find some technological things that no one's found before, but if it's good, someone else is going to find it pretty quickly too. And that's,
So you're basically saying any digital stunt, the minute it's done,
well, it's not even.
It's replicated.
I'm
It's
saying
not-
it's really good, it'll find an audience, and I think that's accurate.
Well, I'm saying that, but I'm also saying that there are avenues digitally, whether it's XM or iRadio or MySpace or what have you, or mobile music, get your ringtone somehow on Verizon because they do something with MySpace. It happens, but I think at the end of the day, there's nothing. It is basically figuring out a unique way to make noise, and it's always showing that people like what you have. And it's figuring out a way to tell that story, and that's how you find a label or go your own route and get your music heard a different way.
Traditionally, there have been two ways that people hear about music for the first time, and by and large, through radio, and it's also been you hear about it from your friends. What has changed in this new world is that the definition of radio has changed. There are so many different venues to get radio, and your definition of your friends have changed. People now have 4,500 friends, on MySpace. But
it's sort of like the music business.
But
You have a lot of friends.
great friends.
You don't know who they are, but you have a lot of friends.
But there's a lot of validity in that. Back to your question about how does an unknown become a known? We're not going to have 100,000 new artists that are selling platinum albums. We might have 100,000 new artists selling 100,000 records, 100,000 singles, 100,000 ringtones, enough, like you said, to make a living, to actually enjoy themselves doing what they do for a living. And by using these new tools of being able to spread the word through your MySpace community, through your Facebook community, creating a video and posting it up on Rever and getting some money out of it, all of these things are available to anybody. And I think, one day an artist came up to me and said, so what will you do for me? And my reply is basically, well, for our sake, we're going to open a door, but you're going to have to do some work, just like you would normally. You have to go tell people about yourself. You have to use these tools that are available to really get your name out there. And if it ends up being with a label, and that's what you want, then great. If it ends up being your self-published album, then that's great as well. I think the whole definition of labels will be changing over the next 5 years as well. And we'll be sitting here 5 years from now at Digital Hollywood, and I
Would it
think
be called
that
Hollywood at that point, or
Digital
might be out?
People's Republic of Santa Monica.
Holographic Hollywood.
And
Neural Hollywood.
there will be, my prediction is we're going to have a new label. And it may be through an acquisition or a merger, but it'll be either Starbucks or Walmart or Verizon or one of their peers that'll be in the music business, just as large as Sony, EMI, and Universal large.
They are in the music business.
Yeah,
Not
I think
saying-
all of those are.
I think the problem is that we look at the music business as the people that sell music instead of the people that make money off music. I mean, that is the problem. Music industry, as we've said many
Right.
times, Ted and I, the music industry is humongous. Everybody makes money off music. Just a lot of them don't spend any money making music or owning copyrights, but everybody makes money.
And you look at
Which
SK
brings,
Telecom. Go ahead.
brings a question. Where does user-generated and user-manipulated content figure into this in terms of, you've got a lot of major artists that you represent. I mean, I'd say the majority of the artists you represent are brand names, Ken?
No,
No?
no, the majority of the artists we represent,
Mhm.
majority of the artists that are brand names that we represent are brand names. No, I mean.
No, that's a good point, okay. Those are the
No,
ones-
you can count the brand names in the business on a few hands, and that's the problem. Is
Right.
that, you know, when to answer your question about how does a new artist get found, fact of the matter is 99.9% of all the people that want to be recording artists for a living will never be. Ever. Under any scenario, under any scheme, whatever, the possibility of making a living as an artist, and there are plenty of people in this building that can give you great war stories, will never make a living as artists. And if that's what they want to do, then they should give it up now. If on the other hand they want to be artists, regardless of whether they make a living,
There's a
right,
support
they
group
will-
that meets
then they-
right after.
Then they will be. No, I mean,
No, I agree with you.
no, I mean, the funny thing is that.
I mean, we used to joke, and you worked with MP3.com, but we used to joke that, you know, there's a lot of artists that should have never recorded. If you don't believe me, listen to MP3.com.
But no, but the thing about it is that the minute that it's about money, it stops being art. I don't know what else it is, but it's not art. And we keep, you know, using this term because it's helpful as these are the artists. But the truth is, if they're doing it for the money, they aren't artists. They're doing it, it's their career, right? It's their business. And so, you know, the problem is the answer to your question, artists that are going to make a living as artists is next to none. It is a rarity. That's why they attract such a big crowd, because they are an anomaly.
Okay, so to restate the question, with the brand name artists that you represent that you can count on one hand, how do your artists feel about their music being manipulated, passed around, edited, mashed up?
Most of them do not have particularly sophisticated opinions about it, but the ones who are really aware and interested and innovative, like Herbie Hancock is a great example.
Okay.
Herbie is completely open to just about anything, right? He believes he never objects to a sample clearance request, no matter who it is, right? He'll always grant sample clearance, and he always tries to be as reasonable as possible in doing so.
But in a world where there's not going to be a request for a clearance, where somebody's sitting home and they're mashing things up and they're posting it on YouTube or Rever or iSpot or wherever they're posting it, how do you deal with that? I mean, is there a letting go?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, my opinion is different than most people who represent artists for a living, if you will. I am of the opinion that the copyright law has done a horrible job of staying up to speed with the technology. That no matter what we try to do, technology is always going to work its way around the copyright restrictions, and therefore trying to find a sort of philosophical objection to what people are doing creatively is a huge mistake. Right. I think that instead, artists should count their blessings that their work is so popular and that their relationship with their audience is so enormous that tens of thousands of people want to rip them off in that fashion and create something non-commercial, but that you and I might describe as a rip-off, for lack of a better term.
So you know people with the Gray album?
Pardon me?
You know people with the
Absolutely
Gray
not.
album?
Absolutely not. And
It's a great record.
By the way, and I would say also that, you know, the problem is that people don't realize what an important role the public domain plays in creativity. Because if it wasn't for the public domain, then, you know, West Side Story's creators would have needed the permission of the estate of, you know, William Shakespeare.
Right.
And that's just plain stupid. And we all know that. But the problem is that with the revisions to the copyright law that take place in this country, now, anything created today will never enter the public domain until long after everyone in this room has been dead.
Okay, so Thursday, because I had nothing to do Thursday morning, I'm addressing the ASCAP retreat up in Ojai.
Oh, you're going to quote me?
No, I'm not going to quote you specifically, but unless you feel, I'm going to go 1 second. So the question is, what do they need to hear? I'm still working on my little talk. What do they need to hear?
They should have no complaint at all. ASCAP should be excited. ASCAP doesn't care who gets ripped off. ASCAP grants blanket licenses. Okay?
Okay.
All ASCAP cares about is that if you want to publicly perform music and get away with it, right?
Right.
You need a license from ASCAP.
Right.
And that license is calculated on a percentage of your revenue or however other blanket licensing scheme they come up with, like they come to your bar and they count your shares and they say, okay, you have to give us a check for X dollars a year. Whatever it is, ASCAP loves this because there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of new virtual restaurants, if you will, that they get to collect money from. ASCAP and BMI and Mary Fox and the publishers are the big winners in this. We've always known they were going to be. But they are the big winners because they are passive income winners. They do not care what people do. They just care that if people want the right to do it, all they have to do is write them a check. Compulsory licenses are good. Blanket licenses are good. Right? Because then, I mean, I said for some time they should have a blanket license for peer-to-peer file sharing. So that we didn't have to care about what kids were doing. We just knew that somewhere somebody was making sure.
You're monetizing the activity instead of trying to blunt it.
Creating a big pool of money and then letting guys like us fight over it.
Right. You had a question?
Yeah. I'm Prashant. I work for a company called Sano in the Valley. And what we ended up...
San Fernando Valley or the other
Yeah,
valley?
the Silicon
The other valley. Okay.
We ended up focusing on using mobile as a communication platform. So we built a mobile platform that allowed artists to communicate with their fans.
Right.
So these artists would get found on MySpace, but then we created a mobile way for these artists to kind of stay in touch with their fans. So we started out with fans wanting to leave messages for the artist, and so I represented an artist called Lil Fizz. He had about 30,000 friends.
Lil Fizz?
Lil Fizz. He's
Lil Fizz.
former.
Bye, Dave.
Former B2K. So on the first day that we put this thing up on his MySpace, he got 8,000 messages. Right? Yeah. And within the next week, he had about 35,000 fans in this mobile fan club as he created it. He then used that to send messages back. He would communicate with them, and then now he tries to push ringtones to them, which they can listen to on the phone and then press 1 and download it. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that strategy as opposed to just pushing the content in everyone's face. Just kind of be more genuine, just communicate and connect, and then kind of like slip the content in from the back. Like,
Okay. Only if you wake the guy in front of you up. Okay. Oh, there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, he's back. Okay. So, I think he's talking about the transition from, quote, that artistic relationship to press 1 to buy my ringtone.
Well, first of all, that's not an artist.
Right, that's not her.
It's making some money. Okay, I think that is an essential part of what is occurring now, where you have a real connection between artist and fan in many, many different places. Yeah, sure, you can sell a lot of ringtones if you put them first on the deck on a phone, but that's one artist, one ringtone that's being sold. The discovery process has to open up, and it's happening. And there's a great example. You get a connection with the artist, you build a fan base, and you use all the various tools available to you to sell ringtones, to sell wallpaper, and to better your art. Because now he's going to be reacting more towards the actual people that are his fans and listening. He knows who they are. And in some cases, he's spoken to them, which is, back in the old days, not so old days, I guess, but people would actually have these things where they'd sit in a coffee shop and they'd play music and people would listen. And it was truly touching the fans. And we just don't see as much of that anymore. And I think this is a way that everybody on MySpace and various sites can really have that communication going. And for a mobile phone, yeah, that's, as you mentioned, it's a communication device. People use these to make these things called phone calls. And now with texting and does he actually call those 8,000 people?
yeah, so he calls in and he records a message and then we broadcast it out to 30
Gotcha.
people.
So it's dear blank, your name here. It's great to hear.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Thank you.
actual
It's an
live-
Acknowledgement. It's basically a response to the form of acknowledgement.
It's
Yeah.
like a reply all.
Okay. Very cool.
Well, it's not a reply to all. It's a reply to
many.
multiple.
So, Sarah, back to you for a moment here, because you're, I don't know, how many months away from the launch of Vista. How does, I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but how does Vista play into mobile? When we talk about this continuum where you've got the third screen as, was it AT&T is promoting the 3 screens? So, how is that all going to work together? Is it going to be a more fluid experience?
Well,
Anyway, so Adam, listen.
let me. I think we all know, everybody who has tried to connect the phone to Windows XP knew about the troubles that comes with you need to install something or it doesn't work at all, or Windows doesn't need
for
to
exasperation.
handle a phone, and these are the problems that we are addressing in Vista, that there's some technology in there and a new kind of mobile device center that Windows is actually able to recognize and connect to a mobile phone and identify the features of the phone. For example, is it a music-enabled device? And it says, hey, this is a music-enabled device. Do you want to copy music from or to the device? And those pieces are not available today. Even if you would assume that this is available, it's not. The current user experience is you connect the phone and Windows says, well, I don't know what that is. And the next generation user experience is you connect the phone and Windows says, it's a phone, it can do music, it can do protected music, it can do this bit rates and so on. So that the user actually knows what he can do with the phone.
Okay. Questions from the audience, other ones? Ann, do you have a question? No? I just call on people. Sid, you must have a question.
I guess it's a quasi-question, but it's really more in answering the question that was asked before about the new artists and discovery. Doesn't it seem like the missing piece here is the social network, the web of trust, the levels of recommendation that are in between, your point to the one ring suit on the deck. On News Virgin Records, we have a large roster. I would love it if every one of our artists were at the top of every deck, but it's simply not reality. There's also the issue of genres of music and what gets featured on a deck versus what doesn't get featured on a deck. But in the endless long tail that you bring up, which I think is an excellent way to look at it, doesn't it seem like the only way that the artist kind of gets closer to the front of that tail or starts doing any significant numbers is to have the webs of trust and the recommendations? And to that point, for ringtone, why isn't there an easy way if I'm standing on a crowded New York street corner, which happens every day, and I hear a ringtone that I'm interested in, there isn't an easy way for me to point my phone at it and I can figure out what it is or get a copy that's of use to me for a limited period of time?
I think that's exactly right. I think that's where we're headed, and I think that the editorial capabilities of the network are only starting to evolve. It's not clear whether, at the end of the day, it's not clear who's going to make money off that editorial process, but I do think that you'll be able to walk into a Starbucks, for example, next year, and if there's a song playing and you like it, you'll be able to push a button on your next generation iPod, and it'll be on your iPod, and it'll just go right into your iPod, and that is golden. That's where we're headed now. Whether or not Apple and iTunes and iPod are the only ones that benefit from such a experience for the near term, I don't know.
But I think Zoom's going there with the community aspect.
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea of Zune. I think that,
Right.
and I think that Zune needs to be trying a little bit harder than they appear to be. And then this is completely unfair since I'm not at all familiar. I've talked to Christine, but I'm not at all familiar with what they're really doing. But Apple appears to have the kind of inertia that the rest of the business needs to figure out. Right. The rest of the business is so disjointed that Apple seems to have the inertia that they can talk like a 300-pound gorilla, and they can walk into Starbucks and say, "Here's what we want to do," and Starbucks will say, "No problem. Where do you want to put the receiver?" And that's at the moment in this country that's the difference. And so, but you're absolutely right. The seamlessness, it's the toaster, right? It's like, hey, I'd really like to have that on my iPod. And then it is.
Yeah, and the closest we are with that right
iPod's
now.
also a phone, and that's why it works, and it's Wi-Fi enabled, and that's why it works. So, that's where we're headed.
And I think wireless carriers are starting to realize they might have some of that they haven't quite gotten there yet. But when you spend the kind of money in marketing that they do, and you have the kind of base that they do, ultimately they'll get there. The problem is that they're kind of laden with a legacy business of voice. They're worried about cannibalizing, and they had to get a whole gargantuan machine to start thinking differently about what they are.
So Adam, I don't know how much you know about the Zoom model, but there's a lot of sharing involved. Have we gotten over our fear of people actually sharing music? And
Well, I think as an industry, we're sharing it. There are different forms of sharing, and I think certainly a legitimate format is the art of discovery, and again going back to tastemaking, which is if your friends are playing something and it's really cool, or you hear something in a Starbucks, you want to learn what that is, and you want to interact with it, you want to be able to have the ability, to purchase it. And I think going back to purchasing, the art of purchasing should be something that's a transaction that's very easy to do, that gets you exactly what you want there and then. so that you have the ability to enjoy it. Because I think at the end of the day, music is the kind of activity that you just, you really want to interact with music there and then when you hear something that's great. And it's not, I don't really quite believe in the idea of, oh, I hear a great song and I should remember that and go back to my PC and then sideload it onto my handset. I don't believe in that. I think the immediacy of, if you're on a street corner in New York and you hear a ringtone, well, first of all, good suggestion would be just go up and ask them what their ringtone might be.
Obviously, doesn't travel the same street corner as you do.
You're between avenues A and C or something like that. All right. But I think there are technologies in place today where you can hold your phone up. And these technologies do exist on I would say limited scales, but I agree with you. There needs to be an element of discovery involved so that people can share, interact with music, and so that we ultimately find a way to distribute that.
But the existence of the technology isn't enough.
I agree with you. I think technology,
For example, the Shazam example, I would say you poll any average 100 people on the street, 99 of them are going to know.
Completely agree with you.
I would say 100 out of 100 would
yeah.
know Shazam. I'd be surprised if 1 out of 100 knew what Shazam was.
But there is a certain kind of convergence, and forgive me for using that term, there's a certain kind of convergence going on in this particular area, which is I think that it may be that there will be a Pandora-like functionality that will merge with a, collaborative filtering kind of capability of the network, and then what will happen is that your device won't just, you won't just say, hey, I heard a song I like it, but instead, your device will hear the song and will buzz you to say, hey, pay attention, there's a song playing right now that kind of fits your profile. It's the kind of thing you like. Listen up. And if it's a song that you already know, you'll ignore it. And if it's not a song that you already know, then your device might say to you, do you want us to try and figure out more, tell you more, or do you want to shut us up? And that interaction would be a really useful interaction.
That's very cool.
And I think that's where we're going. I think that's where this stuff might be heading all by itself without anybody's help. Because the problem is that everybody has an agenda. Everybody has a business strategy, and that's sort of all they obsess about.
Well, it needs to repurpose the existing investment. I mean, if you're a Last FM user, I'm addicted to Last FM, but I spent 6 months building a profile. I want to start from scratch on a new mobile platform for that kind of thing.
This is kind of turning into a therapy session for you.
So I love that.
Please tell us more.
And his wife is a therapist. Exactly. Anne, were you stretching or did you have a question? Okay, good.
So do you think, panel,
Loud as you can.
do you guys think that the adoption of digital cinema and video will happen more rapidly because of the community having gone through it with licensing music? I mean, will the rights holders be more ready to get into the game quickly?
I know I'm not supposed to have a personal opinion, but I think the film industry has leapfrogged dramatically beyond the music industry in terms of their vision around rights.
Yeah, just by not suing YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, that's one example, but actually, it goes deeper than that. Is there an underlying reason in the structure of how the rights are put together that makes that easier? I mean, it seems to me that it should be harder, but.
Ken?
Yeah, I think first of all, yes, there's only one party that has rights typically in a particular work, so that's one thing. In other words, if you're just lifting a piece from my movie, then I own the movie, then I'm the guy that gets to decide that I want to sue. I think the other thing is that what the film industry has learned very quickly is, and the music industry never really got their head around, was that the environments that are the most successful at infringing are also the most appealing vehicles for promotion. And so they decided that, in an industry that has a tremendous amount of difficulty creating awareness for their product, and that awareness translates to opening weekend, and opening weekend translates to break-even promotion for the DVD, that the truth of the matter is that at the moment, anything that raises awareness of your product is good for DVD sales, and therefore should be, embraced.
But that's been the schizophrenia in the music business, is that there's two record companies. There's
Correct.
the label who wants that stuff
Right.
to get there.
Correct. There's
And
two
then
people,
there's-
two people, and then there's Zach Roberts. But the other problem is that the music industry was more easy. Music was more easy to sort of snatch all in one, and capture the experience and have something in your library. YouTube is not putting YouTube in particular, let's just talk about YouTube, because that's really the big target at the moment. YouTube is not putting the 2-hour movie on its site. It's putting a funny scene from the 2-hour movie, or a funny what have you, some scene from Saturday Night Live. Does GE, meaning NBC, sue over that? Or do they go and sit down with the founders of YouTube and say, one, we want you to figure out how to make sure that we participate in your success, and two, we want you to give us some prime real estate to help us promote the kind of stuff that we want to promote.
It's not just because the lawyers on the film side are smarter than the lawyers on the...
Some cases they're the same lawyers.
My father often said that no matter how smart you are, you have to consider the possibility that you might not be smart enough to know how stupid you are. And I think that the lawyers at the film companies, haven't been part of this discussion at this point. I think the lawyers at the film companies would raise their hand and say, yes, they're doing this, or yes, they're doing that. They'd answer that question. But the difference is that the record industry saw peer-to-peer file sharing, Napster, and in fact, before they were infringing anything, they saw MP3.com as a threat to their business model because it democratized distribution of content. And they were
Do you really think that was it?
I
Do
think
you
it's-
really think at the end of the day that was it? I mean, we could debate this offline later, but
Okay, let's.
okay.
I think it comes down to it's always easier going second.
But is there something...
They didn't, did they know the strategy? Music strategy didn't work.
Yeah.
Don't the film studios often have to deal with all these union issues too, and aren't those things that start to bubble up really start to chase this stuff? I mean,
Anyone who can make money off of complaining is going to continue to complain. That's the answer, right? In other words, if there are interest groups that want to make sure that they participate in whatever bounty is received, then that's great. But yeah, I mean, historically, nobody in the entertainment industry is able to get out of their way when it comes to sort of paradigm shift. They tend to get it wrong until the marketplace gets it right.
Dave? No.
So innovation doesn't come from the content owners, the media companies, also usually comes from the startups and founders, right? And there's been this dynamic tension.
Although if you see Borat, if you have a chance to see Borat, which I saw last night, that innovation clearly came from the content side. That movie, yeah, it's
Ali G.
Comes out, yeah. That movie didn't come from the Silicon Valley. So.
It's probably available.
But so my question is, we've seen really, very opposite ends of the spectrum. There's Napster and MP3 lawsuits. Now we've got YouTube. So it seems like the tension between media companies and technology companies is kind of leveling itself out. Do you guys think we've kind of reached, a point where it's kind of just like nice and stable, or are we still sufficiently back and forth between media companies and have we reached equilibrium?
I think no. I think all we've done is we've now lost the definition of a media company versus a technology company. I think it's not fair to describe Yahoo as a technology company, and it's not fair to describe them as a media company. And I think so as
The same thing for Fox.
And
It's
same
not
thing
fair
with
to
Warner
say
Brothers.
Fox
And, I think now what's happened is these companies have just turned into conglomerates that both own technology interests, cable interests, infrastructure interests, and content interests. And the same is true of the Motorola's, the Verizons, and and all these companies. I mean, Hasbro's in the content business.
True, but there's still going to be, the small startups that were most or a lot of innovation. 18 months ago, YouTube was not So I think it's probably safe to say that a lot of innovations will continue to come from small startups.
Right.
That will then be acquired or assimilated somehow. But for those startups to innovate, oftentimes they have to take these risks and push the envelope on content. So do you think we've reached somewhat of the equilibrium where the media companies are, less sensitive to it than they were before?
I don't think they're pulling the trigger as quick. Do you think?
Well, I don't think that unfortunately, I don't think that they are as when he says equilibrium, I think what he may mean is that it's really incest. In other words, I think that now what's happened is that the plaintiffs are much more likely to look like the defendants, or much more likely to understand the defendants and see the defendants as an acquisition target, a business they want to be in,
Right.
as opposed to a business that threatens them.
Yeah,
Right.
they've gone from the first thing is I'm offended versus why didn't I think of that?
Right.
Or how big is that going to be, and how can I buy it before it's worth that much?
Right, and we saw the recent strategy, which is instead of suing them for damages, invest in them for damages. And that seemed to
Okay, so final question. Anybody?
She asked the right question, which is the people that get screwed in that circumstance or participate the least, if you will, maybe that's a nice way to put it, are the creators, the unions, the actors, the directors, because as the buyers get bigger and bigger, then the sellers become less and less important.
So do you think it's gonna, since there's less distinction between the distribution channel and the creators of the content, and that's getting all merged up, and you can't tell which company is which, that that's all gonna get broken apart again?
No, I don't think we're ever going to see that again. That's unfortunate. I don't think that anybody is ever going to, in this environment, this stuff changes too quickly. I don't think anyone's going to be able to look at this stuff and say, oh, we need to break that company up because they've gotten too big in their particular business and their market. No one
With the exception of Microsoft.
No, it's all, no, there's no productive way to break things up anymore. The international borders are far less significant or important than they used to be, and sectors are too integrated with each other, and so as a result, nobody trusts the legislators or the district attorneys or the attorneys general to come up with a good solution. Nobody trusts the courts or the legislature to come up with a better solution to encourage competition than the market.
So as a final prognostication, does Sony and BMG re-break up, or does that continue? Do they break up?
On the music side?
On the music side, does Sony?
No, I don't think they break up.
You don't think it breaks up? Okay. Any final questions? Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, panel.